Returning now to the mound builder tradition among the first peoples of North America, this tradition is known by other names as well, including eastern woodlands as a kind of general description based upon the geography of the region. If you take a look at the map on the left, this territory right here, a little bit under half of the United States, is the eastern woodlands. And while there were a lot of different peoples living in this region, and of course the map lower right actually breaks it into two divisions, nevertheless there are a number of very strong traditions that are shared by these folks. So we think it's fair to link them together. This is a region also that was very, very rich in resources in general. Generally speaking, there was forest, there were rivers, there were streams, there were animals, there were a lot of raw materials. So consequently, the people were supported fairly well by the environment in which they lived. This also means that they don't come up with agriculture quite as fast as the people in Peru, South America, or Mesoamerica, because the motivation wasn't there. And that perhaps is also the explanation for why we get in North America very early ceremonial sites without the support of an agricultural community. This is something incredibly rare. And the eastern woodlands would be an environment where we could expect perhaps that kind of thing to take place. We are going to break it down a little bit. We're going to start with the archaic in a moment, and the site associated with that is called Poverty Point. And then we're going to go ahead in time to the woodlands period and take a look at two fairly impressive artistic complexes as well as cultural complexes, the Adena and the Hopewell. And we'll finish with the really sophisticated Mississippian period and culture. The Archaic period, which roughly dates 8000 BCE to 1000 BCE, lasting, I'd say, coming in 7,000 years, maybe even 8,000 years, spreading beyond those borders. It's a kind of formative period in North America in the East when patterns are laid down that are going to continue for centuries and centuries. You should think about it perhaps as parallel to the Olmec or as parallel to Chavin in terms of the influences, the continuous traditions that we're going to see for centuries and centuries following the emergence here with the Archaic period. We're going to get spiritual practices that are going to show up in the Archaic. These are going to include the development of mounds, which is one of the characteristics or the diagnostics of eastern woodlands. We're also going to find objects that are buried with the dead. These objects often are going to be associated with status, and I think the images that we have on the screen right now are going to be a part of that. Among these objects there will be pipes, and we're going to be talking a little bit about those, as well as rattles and the use of red ochre to decorate the objects that are placed in the burials. What we're looking at right now, the one that you have in your book, Figure 1.4, is a banner stone, and it is located in the Detroit Institute of Arts, and it's one of the really impressive ones. It is very symmetrically carved. It has a hole in the center. The one on the left, perhaps you can see the hole a little bit better, but the one that we have in our textbook, if you look in the middle of it, you can actually see a ridge where the stone has been carved to be able to incorporate an expanded area in the center where a hole can run through it. The term banner stone was applied to these by Westerners who looked at these and thought, oh, these are objects of status and prestige, and they're like an image that's an emblem for a family or an individual. They're like a banner that a knight would carry into battle. So the name banner stone has kind of stuck as being associated with these. And we do think that the larger ones, particularly the ones that were not used, that show no indication of wear, may indeed have been carved for purposes of status and placed with the dead. These are burial items. Both of these are retrieved from the tombs of the deceased. In addition to being very symmetrical, which I think you can clearly see, these also have a finely polished surface. It mattered to the people who were creating these, and pretty clearly also these are accenting the lines that are inherent within, in this case it's carved out of slate, within the slate. They're taking advantage of the design that is inherent to the stone. And when I look at these, it actually reminds me a little bit of the Inca and their reverence for natural materials, particularly for stone, as if they're releasing the striations or the color differences within the stone itself. It is also possible that the shapes of these may have symbolic qualities associated with them. The one that is on the right, I would like you just think about the possibility that it echoes the shape of a butterfly. And when I tell you how these were actually used or how we believe they were actually used, perhaps that will make some sense. The purpose of these, we believe, was as weights or counterweights, I guess, on atlatls. Atlatls were sticks that were attached to spears or throwing sticks that could be used in hunting. The atlatl, and particularly when you add a banner stone or a weight to the atlatl, is going to give you greater leverage, greater thrust, so you can throw your spear further and faster, and in other words, become a more effective hunter. These are going to disappear somewhere around 1000 BCE, which is my end date for the archaic anyway. And the reason they're going to disappear largely in the eastern United States is because there's a new technology, and it's the bow and arrow. And a bow and arrow is a much more effective hunting device as well as a weapon in general. So it's going to replace the spear or the atlatl and the throwing stick. This is a replica up in the top left of our screen that'll give you a little bit of an idea of how this worked. I also have one, I think you can see more clearly the hole. This particularly kind of ochre-shaped banner stone was recently found in New Jersey, and I would like you to be aware that the tri-state area, which I count as our home today, that means New Jersey, my home, and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where most of you are right now, and Delaware, the tri-state region, is a part of this mound complex and the traditions, and we think overall the belief system that was shared by eastern woodlands. So by attaching this to the throwing stick, it would make your ability as a hunter be more secure, make you a more successful hunter. The wood of the stick and the atlatl in the graves, we think this was all buried as a unit. The wood decayed, and so it took the archaeologists a long time to figure out what these stones could possibly have been used for. And consequently, for a long time, they were referred to as a mystery. Archaeologists today, however, have actually reconstructed the atlatls and the throwing sticks, and they know how to use them in an effective manner so they can duplicate the process that was used by early humans in the eastern woodlands. I'd like to add in what's referred to as bird stones, and the reason for that is these are commonly exhibited in museums as well, so you're apt to see them today. These also are referred to sometimes as mysteries because we aren't sure the way in which they were used, but my guess is, and others guess this as well, that they were also weights or counterweights to the throwing sticks that were used by hunters. So if we go down here, I think I've got one hole you can see located right here, and there's a hole on the bottom underneath, so you would be able to tie something to the wood. The back of this has a duplicate hole, so there's two sets of holes, top and bottom essentially, that would allow you to connect this to something, presumably a throwing stick. These do the same thing in terms of accenting the qualities of the stone, creating a smoothly polished surface and a very symmetrical item. They're also very simplified and geometric. In this case, we can recognize the fundamental shape. It is a birdie, that's why we're referring to them as bird stones. They are very abstract. The one in the bottom right here, this guy with the very large eyes, he's referred to as a pop-eyed birdstone. So that's a particular type within the birdstone category. All of the birdstones, I think, symbolically might work with a throwing stick in terms of something that flies, in terms of something that is speedy, or perhaps also as a bird form that might actually help and assist the hunter in his quest for game. About in the middle of the Archaic period, we get an emergence of mound building. The most spectacular example of this in the Archaic period is Poverty Point, which is certainly the largest. It's also going to remain the largest until much later at the time of Cahokia in the Mississippian period. This is figure 3.3, variations thereof. We have a line drawing in the book. It is Poverty Point, and it is located in Louisiana. It consists of 6 ridges. Those are these, and across them, this is huge. This runs about a quarter of a mile. So this is a pretty big structure. It covers 402 acres, 402 acres, the site itself. So we're talking about something pretty large and impressive. These are earthen ridges, the largest North American earthworks, including the plaza. And there is a plaza, a very large open space that's located in the center section of this. There are a series of additional mounds that surround this. One of them, we've named it or nicknamed it the Bird Mound. Maybe it was designed in the shape of a bird, but we're not entirely certain of this. The materials found at this site included a lot of exotic materials from outside that were traded here, indicating a large trade network. We also think this might have been a pilgrimage site where people came and liked to take away a souvenir. You might be thinking something parallel to Chavin in terms of this process. This site is large enough that, like the Nazca Lines, it wasn't recognized without aerial photography, without sighting essentially from the air. The plaza itself, I have in my notes, covers 37 acres, and that's located again right here. This mound, which is the largest that I'm aware of at the site, still stands 70 feet tall. That's accounting for years of erosion. We think that that was built between 30 and 90 days in a relatively short time period. And the reason archaeologists suggest that is that when sampled, the mound contains no layers. There's also no indication that the dirt, the earth that was used in this construction had received any rain. So there's nothing to indicate that there was any point in time where the construction stopped for a period of time. So it seems to have gone very, very quickly. And perhaps that is because of the nature of the society that built it. These folks had not yet acquired agriculture, which makes them extraordinary for creating such a large and complex site without having a settled life and raising crops and raising animals. So perhaps while working at the site, they had to do it quickly to go back to the mainstay, hunting and gathering for purposes of survival. But we do believe this was very large, and it was obviously a group of people working together under the control of a single individual of status. Poverty Point is abandoned somewhere around 500 BCE, and we think that the reasons for this dealt with the environment or with the climate, perhaps with increased flooding of the river. Nevertheless, it is a marker of achievement for the Archaic period and also gives us one of the diagnostics of the Eastern woodland, the mound tradition itself, creating among the achievements of Native Americans some of the grandest earthen works of North America.